Bureau, Yalamanchi, Mr. Schwartz, Mr. Benkin, and ladies and gentlemen in this August hall, meeting on a great mission that we are all working on as to how to further consolidate Indo-Israel relations. Although the title is Hindu-Jew Association or Relations, but both of us are overwhelming majorities, the Hindus in India and the Jews in Israel. And so, in effect, it is whatever we say about Hindus and Jews equally applies to Indo-Israel relations. Yalamanchi introduced me as a detective. I only detect, I don't do detective work. And it's been a great mission with me that India and Israel are made for each other, and therefore they should stay together. I was a graduate student for a PhD at Harvard in the early 60s, and I had many Israeli classmates. Some of them rose to great heights in their country when they went back. One of them was a very good friend of mine called Yoram Ben Porat, who became the president of the Hebrew University. Unfortunately, he died later in a traffic accident. And he came once in the early 80s to India to attend a conference on population control. Both of us were students of a very famous economist called Paul Samuelson, as well as Simon Kuznets. And Simon Kuznets, of course, had very close connections with Israel. And so when he came, he called me up in a very hushed voice. And he said that, will you see me? I said, of course I'll see you. Where are you? He told me the hotel. I went there. And he was looking like a frightened person. So I said, what happened? He said, I came for a conference, and the conference sponsors said that please introduce yourself as an American and not as an Israeli. So I said, I'm surprised. I mean, that conference sponsors are idiots, if you tell me that. But anyway, what can I do for you? He said, I want to see Taj Mahal. So I said, okay, I'll do the best thing for you. I'll put you on a tourist bus, and you go all the way to Agra, the city where the Taj Mahal is, see it, and come back. He said, but what will happen to me when I go there? People warn me I should not reveal my identity. I said, don't be silly. Just tell everybody, I am an Israeli, and see the reaction. So he went and came back, and he was a transformed man. He was effusive, he was back to his old self. I said, what happened? He said, I sat in the bus, the guy next to me asked me, which country you're from? I said, Israel. He said, Israel, they are our friends. And the passengers took me to their residences in Agra and gave me dinner, lunch, and so on, and put me back. He said, I never would have believed this if I had not seen it. Throughout the existence, from the beginning of the existence of Israel, modern existence in 1948, the Indian people overwhelmingly supported Israel. And that's for the courage that the Israelis showed. Surrounded by a hostile environment, a handful of people converting desert land into greenery, producing technology which is never known before to the human beings. So this admiration was there. And it is wrong to say that India's policy was because of the Muslim vote. Muslims generally in India have no particular stand on Israel. Yes, there are intellectuals, left-wing people particularly, amongst the Muslims who make it an issue. Some of them are financed from abroad for their studies. But I have met Muslims who have come to me saying, can you get me a visa? I want to go and see Al-Aqsa Mosque. And there are people who have never held this against me, that because I was advocating openly Israel. The real reason why India hesitated, and I'm not justifying it, but the real reason India hesitated was the Soviet influence in India and the Soviet patronage of certain terror-promoting states like Syria, Libya, and other countries. It's the Soviet Union which felt that Israel is a gateway to the United States. And if India improves its relations with Israel, then India has improved its relations with the United States at the expense of Soviet Union. And the whole transformation took place when Soviet Union ceased to exist. In 1990, it collapsed. I had been from the time I returned from Harvard and joined Indian politics in the early 70s, I had been advocating we should diplomatically have ambassadors from Israel exchanged. We had recognized Israel on 17 September 1950. And we had a consulate in Bombay. But we did not have an embassy in Delhi. So the only thing was to have that level. That too was promised, but then Jawaharlal Nehru became so close to the Soviet Union, so it became a factor. And that's why the delay took place. My first visit to Israel was in 1982, when Prime Minister Begin personally wrote me a letter inviting me to Israel. So in Parliament, Mrs. Gandhi read about it from the newspaper that the Israelis had invited me and I was going. So she personally appealed to me in the floor of Parliament that please don't go to Israel. I said, I'm not a member of your party that you should ask me this question. So she said, no, but the impression will be that you are going with my support. And there will be an impression spread by the enemies of India. I said, well, that's not a good enough reason. She said, well, there has been, this is all on the floor of Parliament. She says there has been a big massacre in Shatila in Lebanon, in which the Israelis were responsible, and this is the wrong time to go. I urge you once again. I said, I'm ready to agree to you if you can show me one country in the world where their massacre has not taken place. I'll go to that country. In fact, at that very time, there was a huge massacre which took place in Assam in India. And I pointed it out to her. And then, when finally I was about to leave, I got a call from her to have tea in her office. And she told me that I wish we could have had good relations with Israel. But I'm sorry, I've got these compulsions. And therefore I can't do it, but wish you a good visit. So this was the undercurrent in India throughout. In 1990 or 1989, the Israeli consulate decided to invite some Indian journalists to visit Israel. They're all prominent journalists from Delhi. But the visa had to be issued in Bombay. And these journalists didn't want to go to Bombay because it would mean expenses. So they didn't want to go. The Israeli consul, they wanted the Israeli consul to buy them the ticket. But Israeli consul obviously couldn't do it. So they asked me, what's the solution? I said, issue them in Delhi. He said, in Delhi, how can we issue it? We don't have an office. I said, you come to my residence in my drawing room, you set up an office and issue the visas. So the first Israeli flag hoisted in New Delhi was on top of my residence. Soon thereafter, government came. I became the senior cabinet minister of Commerce, Law and Justice. And the Prime Minister told me, I asked the Prime Minister, let's recognize Israel. Let's have ambassadors exchange with Israel. So he said, you prepare a note and send it to me, and then we'll have a cabinet meeting and decide. But he said, before I do that, I want one promise from you. I said, what? He says, in my farm, I want an Israeli cow. I said, why? He said, I hear they give an average of 11,000 liters per year. An Indian cow only gives 200 liters per year on the average. So he said, I want an Israeli cow. I said, I can't promise that, but if you invite for dinner the Israeli consul from Bombay, I can get a commitment from him. So the first Israeli consul meeting the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Chandrasekhar at that time, was at my initiative, at his residence, where we all had dinner together and we decided that we will exchange ambassadors. But two developments delayed it. One was the Gulf War I, and then the subsequent fact that our government ran into trouble and it fell. And thereafter, elections were held, and Narasimha Rao, who brought economic reforms, really, he came to power. And he wanted me to join the government, but he had a condition that I would join his party. I said that I can't do, because I can never be in the Congress party. Because of the fact that Congress party had been thoroughly prepared and penetrated by the Soviet influenced people. Mr. Benkin talked about the JNU. JNU used to be called as Kremlin on the Jamuna, you see. And of course now the character is changing with new students. They are now, JNU is also undergoing transformation. So Mr. Rao then created a special commission, gave me cabinet rank so I could attend. And it was Mr. Rao who, with great sagacity, made the decision, implemented the decision that we had already processed, and the Israeli ambassador came to India and the Indian ambassador went to Israel. And since then we have not looked back. Our strength, our relations are growing day to day. And we hear it here and there. Recently, the Pakistan terrorists entered the city of Gurdaspur in Punjab. And that's a very crucial city because it's the connecting link road-wise with Kashmir and the rest of India. And so if Gurdaspur had become taken over by the terrorists, would have had a problem. And within 4 hours, a team that we have called the SWAT team, that SWAT team finished them all off. And then the commandant was interviewed, and he said, how did you manage this operation so fast? He says, we were trained in Israel, that's why. I mentioned this to the Israeli ambassador, and he said, yes, we regularly prepare train your commando teams for anti-terror operations, and they always get the first prize in the competition amongst all the countries that we train. So today we are in a much stronger position to meet terror because of the training that Israel has given. Israel and India has complementarities. But the fundamental complementarity that we have to give effect to today is the fact that you are surrounded by more than 100 million Arabs, and each of them occasionally issues a statement that they want to liquidate Israel. We are a 1.25 billion people, and therefore your lack of manpower is our responsibility. And I'm presently working on a military agreement, a defense agreement between India and Israel, which has a clause that if ever Israel is attacked or invaded, Indian troops will land in Israel to defend it. Now, of course, you see, some of the things besides the Israeli cow, which I saw in your country, in Israel, amazed me. You don't have rivers, but you have desalinated seawater, and you get water 24 hours a day. We have a peninsula kind of geography, so much water, seawater, and yet we have water shortage in our country. This is one. Second is what you have done for irrigation, the drip irrigation, which has now become a craze in India. So I think, therefore, we two countries appear to have been made for each other. And we must now go on exploring more and more areas where we can cooperate. We have a major threat looming in the world, which is much worse than the threat posed by Hitler in World War II, and that is the threat of the ISIS. What they did to the Yazidis should be an eye-opener for everybody. They paraded Yazidi women naked in a marketplace and auctioned them. And the world just kept quiet. And these were the most defenseless people, the Yazidis. So this ISIS is spreading. And it has now come to the borders of India. It's certainly penetrated Pakistan. There are little pockets in India too, where you see ISIS flags. I think we have to prepare for a final major confrontation. And for that, in my opinion, ISIS itself has identified their principal enemies. India is one of them, Israel is another, United States is another. I think the time has come for the three countries to sit down and work out an arrangement by which this menace of the ISIS should be ended. I also say this much, that we have participated in almost every dimensions of human endeavor between India and Israel. I was part of a Hindu-Jew dialogue in which your chief rabbi came to New Delhi. And we had a discussion. What is the fundamental difference between our two religions? And finally, it was narrowed down to only one point. And that point was that the chief rabbi said that you believe in polytheism and we believe in one God. Swami Dayanand Saraswati, who was the pioneer of this Hindu-Jew dialogue, he said, no, you got it wrong. And we believe in one God, but many manifestations. For the explanation to the people of the concept of God, we find it easier to give them human form and in multiple forms. And therefore, our commitment, our religion is founded on the idea of one God, just as Judaism is. And on that, it was concluded that two religions of ours, ancient as they are in fact in perfect harmony with each other. So even religiously, India and Israel are very, very close. I would like to tell you that whenever it becomes necessary, the people spontaneously respond. When the new Indian government, that is Narendra Modi's government, had supported the UN resolution in favor of the Hamas, there was consternation in the country. I found out that it was an old brief of the foreign ministry that just went, and the new government didn't have time to revise it. The Prime Minister told me that, in fact, he was not even aware that such a vote would be taken, that it was very peripherally discussed, and then the action was taken. To demonstrate that this was an exception, my colleague, I don't know whether he's here, Jagdish Shetty, he had, based in Bombay, he called for a public meeting to condemn the vote and to say that it will never happen again. And that meeting broke all records of such meeting. And your consul who was there, now he's called Consul General, he came and he became so emotional. He said, never would I have expected a public meeting in the city of Bombay where you come to the support of Israel when your government has taken a different stand. That is the spontaneity you will see. And it's not because you are putting the Muslim Islamic terrorists in their place. That's not the main reason. People think that's the reason. That's not the reason. The reason is the admiration for the grit of the Israelis in dealing with a variety of enemies. And sometimes the Israeli ambassador gets embarrassed, but many times we go and congratulate him on an activity which he doesn't want to own up. For example, there was a Hamas leader in Dubai, and 4 people came from somewhere, entered the hotel, went to his room, cut him to pieces, put him in a bag and put him in a garbage can and left. And the allegation was that the Israelis had done it. And later on, there was a dinner party in which the Israeli ambassador was there, and everybody was going to him and congratulating him. Wonderful, wonderful. He said, I had nothing to do with it. Israel had nothing to do with it. Nobody was prepared to believe that there is any other country in the world which can carry out such precision operations except Israel. So they said, you must teach us how to do it. Because we too have problems of some terrorists who go around in hotels and stay in Dubai. And we would like to know how that can be done. Even today, nobody knows who did it. There's not a trace. And it was done in the heart of a 5-star hotel in Dubai. These are the reasons why the Indians have an innate admiration for Israel. It has not got to do with economic, yes, we are now in trade, we are your number 1 in some places, or we are now number 4 in your total global trade and so on. We have risen quite a bit. But those are, activities which are normal. But the fundamental is the emotional bond that is developed between the Hindus, or I would say Indians and the Israelis, and that bond is difficult to break. So we can only go forward and not even an inch backwards. The relationship between India and Israel, the relations between India and Israel is irreversible. And this is now to be taken as a given in international affairs. I have some questions being said to me. Let me see which has got to do with this Israel matter. No, one has got to do with Rahul Gandhi. I can't deal with that now. Another about Bihar elections, I can't deal with it. So I'll deal with that in another occasion. If you send me an email, I will reply to those questions. So therefore, I am extraordinarily, thank you. He says, the question is, what specific steps we both communities can take to develop further Hindu-Jewish dialogue in Chicago? I think, first of all, you need to have a stable committee of India, Hindus and Jews, and they should make it a point to structure a association, and the association can meet in a all United States conference, and I'm sure that will be a huge response to that. Should have study groups which should work on different aspects of collaboration. The government of India would be greatly benefited by position papers coming from such an association as to how we can further our collaboration. So I think, therefore, with this environment, I'm very happy that I was part of a process in which it ultimately led to fruition. Then I started, people said there's no hope. There were many people who said you are hurting your political career by taking this stand, but it turned out quite the opposite. And that is the underlying factor, that this is what the people of both countries want. We have no conflict of interest. We have a great deal of mutuality of interests, and therefore let us bond together and build a new alliance for the world. Thank you.